Well, good morning, Crane, and it's the morning of Wednesday, the 19th of June, 2019. And this morning I'm in the heart of Wales, and the mountain you see behind me is Cadair Idris. And I must confess that an attempt to walk up it did get rather a struggle. Not so much for me, but for my 15-year-old dog. And so at about the three-quarter point, we had to call it a day and turn around. Anyway, I'm going to enjoy some more of Mid Wales before entering back into the full fray with the socio-psychopaths who wrongly believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. Now, the title of this morning's broadcast is Big Pharma and the UK Judiciary Attempt a Snow Job. And of course, this is a reference to the corrupt Judge Michael Snow. And Judge Michael Snow has been called out for his behaviour in court, not least with his assertion that Julian Assange is a narcissist. And of course, this statement alone demonstrates the prejudice with which Judge Michael Snow enters into the courtroom. So any pretense of entering into a hearing literally with an open mind and making a decision based solely upon the evidence presented at that hearing is literally thrown out of the window. So when you have a whore to the corporatocracy like Judge Michael Snow, of course it's regarded as a safe pair of hands, and he will do whatever it is that he's effectively instructed to do by his corporate paymasters. So obviously Michael Snow demonstrated that he entered the courtroom with a prejudged position on Assange and labelled him a narcissist. And as somebody rightly observes, that unless Snow is effectively a qualified psychiatrist, then he's completely out of order in making such an assertion, and should be recused from his position of responsibility immediately. But of course, that won't happen, because once you are a proven whore, then you can be trotted out to rule on whatever it is that the establishment want you to rule. So obviously Snow got his instructions over the weekend that when he appeared and sat at Westminster Magistrates Courts on Monday morning to hear the case to accelerate the arrest and extradition of Lyn Thyer, then he would already made up his mind. And obviously, having been pre-warned that John Smith would be there as Lyn Thyer, because he effectively owns the legal fiction, then Judge Snow, what did he do? He lost the plot, basically. He ranted and called upon security to evict John Smith from the court. Now, that alone shows that Judge Michael Snow knew very well that he was on the back foot, because had he been confident of his jurisdiction, then he would have held John Smith in contempt. But of course, he couldn't do that. So he did the only thing that he had been instructed to do, which was to evict John Smith from the court, which then enabled him to effectively rule the extraordinary rendition, because that's what it is, the extraordinary rendition of Lyn Thyer to France. Now, in yesterday's broadcast, I made some observations regarding Lyn's alleged crimes, but I just want to read part of an email that I received from David Noakes yesterday, clarifying the situation regarding Lyn Thyer's involvement in the development of GC-MAF, which I think everybody watching this knows is a proven, extremely effective treatment for cancer, up to and including cure. Well, So David wrote to me yesterday and he said, I said in the broadcast that Lyn had been prosecuted for the heinous crime of developing, producing and distributing GC meth. Lyn was developing GC meth in 2010, which is quite legal. It never went further than Professor Marco Ruggiero's laboratory in Florence, Italy. Lyn developed the technique, but she never actually produced any GC meth. Producing GC meth was done from October 2010 by Alpha Biologics Limited in Cambridge, and later by Biomunitech's own laboratory. Lyn was never on the payroll of either organisation. Lyn never produced or distributed GC meth. Distributing was absolutely down to me, David Noakes, and Immunobiotech Limited. Lyn was successful in nursing 300 patients with ghastly diseases in Guernsey and Switzerland under Professor Marco Ruggiero, MD. Lyn never had a job in the office of Immunobiotech. So, as has been previously stated, the MHRA and the Crown Prosecution Service could not find any justification to charge Lyn Thyer in the UK. But trumped up charges by the French and the French equivalent of the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, which is effectively a pseudo-government organisation, which are really the henchmen for Big Pharma, to make sure that nothing comes to market that challenges the supremacy of Big Pharma and its outrageous revenue streams reaped from administering chemo and radiotherapy to people who basically think they have no other option. So, Lyn is, I don't think, in France. It seems that up until late last night, the police were struggling to establish the whereabouts of Lyn Thyer, having called David at about 10:30, and although apparently the person hung up before David could answer the phone, but he called back, and he ended up speaking to a policewoman who was expressing her concerns regarding the safety of Lyn Thyer, where David corrected her and said, you're not really concerned about the safety of Lyn Thyer, you are more concerned about getting her into custody and effecting the illegal, unlawful ruling of Judge Michael Snow. Now, of course, the likelihood is that the policewoman at the other end of the line genuinely believed that Lyn Thyer might be at risk. But let's hope that she now does a little bit more research and understands how she was simply being used as a tool of the state to try and effect the extraordinary rendition of Lyn Thyer to France. So this is not over by any stretch of the imagination, and wherever you may be, Lyn, then you can be sure that the thoughts and the prayers and the well wishes of an increasingly expanding number of people are with you and wish you well. And, the beauty of this is that, of course, the law of unintended consequences, GC meth, is now very much in the vocabulary. And every day I get messages and emails from people asking where they can get a source or find a source of GC meth. Because people are realizing that the pharmaceutical industry has zero interest in curing people of cancer. Its only interest is reaping the outrageous sums of money from the NHS as they provide the resources for chemo and radiotherapy. And anyone who has lost anyone to cancer knows fine well that basically any suggestion to an oncologist that you might like to try an alternative treatment is simply met with a snigger and derision. And, I can remember asking an oncologist if maybe changing diet would have any effect whatsoever in dealing with cancer, to which the oncologist responded saying, well, I don't know, that's outside my area of expertise. Which, pretty much goes to show that an oncologist is simply a front of house salesman for Big Pharma. So, Lyn, and David, you have done humanity an amazing service. You know, GC Math isn't going away. An increasing number of people are looking it up. An increasing number of people are reading the documents, the papers that have been submitted to the American Library of Medicine, otherwise known as PubMed. And we simply ask that people do their own research and seek out the academic papers that have been written reporting on the efficacy of GC Math, a product which Big Pharma is doing everything it possibly can to deny to those who need it. So, more of this, I'm sure, but meanwhile, Lyn, we wish you well. And Judge Michael Snow, hopefully your behaviour will come under increasing scrutiny, and you will be judged accordingly for your actions at some future juncture, wherever that may be. Well, what could people do in the meantime? At the very least, I would encourage people to go to the Common Law Court website. That's commonlawcourt.com, and register your live birth. Because obviously, as more and more people register their live births, and more people understand the fraud of Cestui Qui, then more and more people will understand the legitimacy of the challenge against the fraudulent establishment. And I can sow the seed here that at AV 10.1 in October, there is a very, very good prospect of a speaker who will shed remarkable light on this fraud. And it's a speaker that I am certainly looking forward to hearing what he has to say. I've spoken to this particular individual on numerous occasions over the past few years, and have always been fascinated by his insights and his research. And now he's ready to start sharing that research, and hopefully he will be taking the platform at AV 10.1, but more of that a little later. But meanwhile, do go on to commonlawcourt.com and look at the documentation there, look at the information, register your live birth, and then seek to perhaps observe and ultimately participate in a future common law court, because it really is time for the people to start regaining control from the socio-psychopaths. And all those people who write under these videos saying, oh my goodness, what did you expect? You know, they're so powerful. Well, the establishment thanks you very much for making those observations. But you know what? You need to step aside. You need to get out of the way, and you need to just carry on in your particular role in life, whatever you may feel that is, and allow those who do see what's occurring, and allow those who do have the commitment to bring about the changes that we all know we need to see for the benefit of humanity, and not for the benefit of the few socio-psychopaths who think they're the rightful rulers, and then those who think that all they got to do is kiss butt and take the salary, and then they can have a nice life. Well, elsewhere, of course, the corruption is self-evident, no more so than in Peterborough. And, you know, the morning after the election, the by-election result in Peterborough was announced, I called foul. And I said that, you know, all of the analyses, all of the polls prior to the Peterborough by-election indicated that it was going to effectively be a landslide for the Brexit Party. So imagine my lack of surprise when it was announced that Labour had won the election by some 600 odd votes. Well, it now transpires that there is in fact a police investigation, but you know, I thought it was pretty shocking when I heard the unconfirmed report that there were some 6,000 postal votes included in the count for Peterborough. So imagine my shock, horror and absolute disbelief when I discovered that it wasn't 6,000 postal votes, it was 9,898. So 9,898 votes out of a total of 33,998 were postal. If you believe that, then I have some really attractive beachfront property that you might want to consider in downtown Birmingham. Because that is just absolute codswallop. And of course it has been acknowledged for nearly, 20 years now, that postal votes are the easiest way to manipulate an election. And of course this was certainly the case in 2005 when Tony Blair was manipulated back into office, despite the fact that he was at the depths of his popularity following his commitment and his sucking up to George W. Bush to invade Iraq a couple of years earlier. And the only way they could get Tony Blair back into office was to manipulate the Sedgefield vote with postal votes. And here we go again. So is anything likely to come of this? Or, is it just going to be discussion? And then the police are going to say, well, no, actually, we couldn't find any evidence. 9,898 postal votes, just a tad shy of 30%. 1/3 of all votes cast in Peterborough were postal. I don't think so. And neither does any right-thinking individual. So, and even if there were that number of postal votes, then the way in which that they were obtained, because there are reports of certain activists descending upon nursing homes and literally standing over people in nursing homes, getting them to complete the postal votes, and then, sending them off for them. So one way or another, it looks like Peterborough, of course, is the epitome of the banana republic. So anyway, no doubt what will happen is if it comes to court, they'll get Judge Michael Snow to sit in judgment, and he can do yet another snow job in burying the fraud of the establishment. So bear in mind that obviously there may be other by-elections coming up, and we have potentially a general election, certainly by 2022. And, we need to start asking the questions about postal votes. From my perspective, if you can't vote, tough. Applying for a postal vote should be exceptional. It shouldn't be available, and certainly not to 30% of the electorate, because I think we all know, where that leads. Well, and finally, of course, on the global stage, we still have Michael Pompeo and John Bolton and Trump, of course, all claiming that Iran was responsible for the attacks on the Norwegian and the Japanese tankers in the Gulf of Oman. Well, the only person on the global stage that seems to have said, oh, yeah, absolutely, it was definitely Iran, is none other than Jeremy Hunt. And, of course, Jeremy Hunt is chasing the Tory party leadership, but in reality, I think we all know that, Boris looks as though he's a shoo-in. And why? Because Boris has more than enough skeletons so that he can be controlled in the usual fashion. So anyone who thinks that once Boris gets into office there's going to be any difference, dream on. The script has already been written. It's just a question of which character fronts the particular pantomime. Well, of course, the role of John Bolton, he believes, is to ignite global conflict. He's been trying for 25 plus years, and he ain't going to give up anytime soon. So, of course, fortunately, there are governments and diplomats all around the world saying that actually the evidence needs to be somewhat more substantive before we start committing the allegation that Iran was responsible. And I mean, this is a classic case, just like anyone who still believes that Saddam Hussein set light to the wells in Iraq in 1991 just hasn't been paying attention. Those wells were set alight by US and British special forces, the purpose being to demonize Saddam and to keep Iraqi oil off of the global marketplace. And funnily enough, what's going on right now is an attempt to demonize Iran to keep Iranian oil off of the global marketplace and openly try and effectively initiate a regime change in Iran, because Iran is one of the few remaining countries that operates outside of the fraud of fractional reserve banking, outside the fraud of the World Bank. And so consequently, the powers that think they are want to bring Iran to heel. And of course, this is very much driven by a certain other Middle Eastern country that believes that it should have global dominion. Can't do it directly, so it does it by proxy, which is primarily the US and the UK. And, well, you know, just check out the relationship between the candidates for Prime Minister, i.e. leader of the Tory party, so Prime Minister by default, and their relationship with the Friends of Israel. And of course, if they alluded to anything else, then they wouldn't be candidates, would they? So, as is always the case, do your own research. Don't take anything that I say at face value. And, you know, for all those people who are now starting to look at the alternatives to chemo and radiotherapy, hold the faith. Ultimately, you must decide what it is that you want to do. And if you decide that chemo and radiotherapy is the best treatment that's on offer for your particular condition, or the condition being experienced by a loved one, then obviously that's the path you must take. On the other hand, if you decide that there are alternatives that you want to explore and experiment with, then that, as a living man or living woman, should be your prerogative. And those options should not be denied to you by a sociopathic, corporatist establishment agenda supported by a corrupt judiciary. So, is it going to be the snow job, or are you going to take some responsibility and do your own research and come to your own conclusions of what is unfolding in this outrageous learning experience that we call life? You take it easy, you have a great day, and I will be back with you on Friday morning at 8:30. You take care now.